The fastest way to find out who truly belongs in your life is not to test them with hardship. It is to overwhelm them with generosity and then watch what happens next. That single move, done without calculation, without expectation, without a single string attached, will reveal more about a person's character in 2 weeks than 10 years of casual friendship ever could. Most people never figure this out. They spend decades surrounded by the wrong people, bleeding time and emotional energy into relationships that were never going to pay off, and they wonder why they feel so hollow inside. They build walls. They keep their distance. They approach every new connection like a chess match, carefully guarding their queen, never making a move until they are absolutely certain they will not lose a piece. And honestly, who can blame them? If you have lived long enough to have been burned by someone you trusted, someone you fed and supported and showed up for, only to watch them vanish the moment you needed something in return, then of course you are going to be cautious. Of course you are going to keep one hand on the door handle every time you walk into a new relationship. That instinct to protect yourself is not paranoia, it is pattern recognition. It is your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do, which is to keep you safe from threats, including the social kind. But here is the problem with that strategy. It does not actually work. Playing defense in relationships is like trying to find gold by never digging. You might avoid hitting a rock, sure, but you are also never going to strike anything valuable. The people who are genuinely masterful at reading others, the ones who somehow always end up surrounded by loyal, generous, deeply good human beings, do not play defense at all. They play a completely different game. They lead with generosity. They walk into new relationships and immediately start giving. They pick up the check without being asked. They offer help before it is needed. They send the text, they make the call, they show up with coffee on a Tuesday morning for no reason at all. And they do this not because they are naive or foolish or because they have some bottomless need to be liked. They do it because they understand something that most people miss entirely. Unconditional generosity is the most powerful psychological litmus test ever invented for reading another person's character. This idea has deep roots in philosophy. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued that a person's true arrogance and selfishness do not emerge when they are struggling or desperate. Those qualities stay hidden when someone is fighting for survival because survival demands cooperation, humility, and restraint. It is when everything is handed to someone on a silver platter, when they are swimming in abundance and favor and comfort, that the real personality crawls out from behind the mask. Scarcity makes people behave. Abundance reveals who they actually are. Think about that for a moment because it runs completely counter to the popular wisdom. Most of us assume that hardship is the great revealer, that you find out who someone really is when the chips are down. And there is some truth to that. But Schopenhauer's insight cuts in the other direction. You also find out who someone really is when the chips are up, when they are receiving instead of struggling, when life is pouring good things into their lap and the only question left is what they do with the overflow. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist whose work reshaped everything we know about human decision-making, identified a related phenomenon. Human beings have an almost irresistible instinct to rationalize the good things that come their way. When someone receives an unexpected act of generosity, the initial response is almost always gratitude. But over time, the brain starts running a quiet little program in the background, a program that whispers, maybe I received this because I deserve it. Maybe this is not a gift at all. Maybe this is simply the universe recognizing my value. It is not a conscious process. Nobody sits down and deliberately decides to be ungrateful. The shift happens automatically like a thermostat adjusting to a new temperature, and it happens at different speeds for different people. And that speed, that rate of psychological adaptation, is precisely what separates three fundamentally different types of human beings. The first type is someone you already know. You have met them at neighborhood barbecues, at work happy hours, at reunions and birthday parties and random Saturday night dinners. They are the people who take your generosity, enjoy it genuinely in the moment, say something warm and appreciative, and then evaporate. Here is a classic American example that plays out 1,000 times a day in every city in this country. You have an old college buddy named Steve. You have not seen Steve in years, but you happen to be in the same city for a weekend, so you text him and suggest grabbing dinner. You pick a nice steakhouse, you insist on paying the whole bill, appetizers, entrees, a bottle of wine, the works, because you are genuinely happy to see him and you want the evening to feel like a celebration, not an accounting exercise. Steve has a great time. He leans back in his chair, pats his stomach, and says something like, "Man, you really didn't have to do that. Next time it's on me, I promise." And he means it in the moment. He really does. But next time never comes. A month goes by. 6 months. A year. Steve never reaches out. He never suggests getting together again. He does not send a text on your birthday or check in when he sees on social media that you had a rough week. He is not a bad person. He is not scheming or manipulating or deliberately withholding. He simply does not carry the weight of social debts the way some people do. For Steve, that dinner was a pleasant experience that ended when the check was paid, and he filed it away in the same mental category as a good movie or a nice sunset. Enjoyable, forgettable, gone. The French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau described this tendency with characteristic bluntness. Human beings are, at their core, consumed by their own comfort and safety, and they extend genuine interest to others only when it costs them nothing and requires no sustained effort. Steve is a Rousseau person. He is pleasant, he is harmless, and he is fundamentally shallow when it comes to the economy of human connection. The right move with Steve is not anger and it is not resentment. The right move is clarity. You simply recalibrate your expectations. Steve is a wave hello at the grocery store friend, not a call at 2 in the morning when your world is falling apart friend, and that is perfectly fine. Not every relationship needs to be deep. Not every person needs to be a soulmate. The mistake is not in having Steves in your life. The mistake is in expecting Steve to be something he was never built to be and then feeling betrayed when he acts exactly like himself. You nod, you smile, you keep it light, and you save your emotional investment for the people who have proven they are worth it. No bitterness required. Just awareness. Now, the second type of person is rarer, more valuable, and more important to your long-term happiness and survival than almost anything else in your life, including your career, your savings account, and your health insurance. These are the people who receive your generosity and feel it land somewhere deep inside them, somewhere that does not forget. They do not treat your kindness as a pleasant breeze that passes through. They treat it as a sacred transaction, something that creates an invisible bond, a quiet obligation that they carry with them until they find a way to honor it. Anthropologist Marcel Mauss spent his career studying the gift economies of indigenous cultures around the world, and he concluded that the single most powerful force holding human societies together across all of recorded history was not law, not religion, not military power, it was the felt obligation to reciprocate generosity. When someone gives you something meaningful, whether it is an object, a service, or simply the warmth of their attention, a healthy human psyche responds with what Mauss called a sacred duty to return the gift. Not necessarily in equal measure, not necessarily in the same form, but in some form at some point with genuine intention behind it. The people who embody this principle are the ones you want to build your life around. They are rare, and when you find one, you hold on with both hands and you do not let go. Let me give you an example. There is a woman named Dorothy who lives in a suburb outside of Chicago. Dorothy is 60 years old. She has been retired from teaching for a few years, and she has the kind of warm, generous spirit that makes everyone on her block feel a little safer just knowing she is there. Every fall, when the weather turns cold, Dorothy spends an entire weekend making enormous batches of homemade chili, cornbread, and apple pie, and she packs them into containers and delivers them to her neighbors. She has been doing this for 20 years. Most people accept the food gratefully, say thank you, and return the empty containers eventually, sometimes clean, sometimes not. Dorothy does not keep score. She does not expect anything in return. That is just who she is. But one fall, a young woman named Megan moved into the apartment next door. Megan had just relocated from across the country for a new job. She did not know a soul in the city. She was eating takeout every night and spending her weekends alone, unpacking boxes in a quiet apartment. Dorothy knocked on her door with a container of chili and a loaf of cornbread, said welcome to the neighborhood, and went on her way. A week later, Megan showed up at Dorothy's door holding the empty container. But inside the container was a small batch of handmade chocolate chip cookies and a handwritten note on a piece of lined notebook paper. The note said, "Dorothy, I moved here not knowing anyone, and that night I ate your chili. I cried because it tasted like something my grandma would have made. I'm not much of a cook, but I can bake a little, and I wanted you to know that your kindness meant more to me than I can say. Thank you for making me feel like I have a home." Dorothy read that note standing in her doorway and felt her chest tighten in the best possible way. She told me later that in 20 years of sharing food with her neighbors, no one had ever written her a note like that. Not because her other neighbors were bad people, but because most people simply do not think to do it. Megan did. And that one small gesture, those cookies and that note, told Dorothy everything she needed to know about the kind of person Megan was. The two of them became inseparable. They are like mother and daughter now. Dorothy goes to Megan's apartment for movie nights. Megan drives Dorothy to her doctor's appointments. When Dorothy's husband passed away last year, Megan was the first person at the door, and she stayed for 3 days. That is what happens when two people who understand the sacred weight of generosity find each other. It is not about the dollar amount. Megan did not buy Dorothy a car or pay her mortgage. She baked cookies and wrote a note. But the intention behind it, the refusal to let kindness pass through her without acknowledgement, the deep respect for another person's effort, that is the signature of a second-type person, and it is worth more than gold. If you have someone like this in your life right now, stop reading for a moment and think about them. Picture their face. Remember the last time they did something small but meaningful for you. And then make a decision right now that you are going to protect that relationship with everything you have, because people like Megan are the ones who will hold your hand in the hospital, who will answer the phone at midnight, who will drive across the state in a snowstorm if you need them. They are the rarest resource on earth, and they do not advertise. You find them by being generous first and watching who responds with their whole heart. And now we come to the third type, and this is the one that will cost you years of your life, thousands of dollars, and more emotional damage than you can calculate if you do not learn to spot them early. These are the people who take your generosity, enjoy it, get used to it, come to expect it, and then punish you when it stops. There is a famous line that has been floating around American culture for years. When kindness becomes a habit, people start treating it like a right. That line is not just clever. It is a precise description of a real psychological phenomenon, and it is backed by hard neuroscience. When a person receives an act of generosity for the first time, the brain releases a surge of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. That dopamine hit feels good, creates a sense of warmth and gratitude and connection. But the human brain is ruthlessly efficient at adapting to repeated stimuli. If the same act of generosity is repeated again and again, the dopamine response weakens each time. The brain recalibrates its baseline. What was once a delightful surprise becomes the new normal, and the new normal does not trigger dopamine anymore. It just feels like Tuesday. And here is where it gets dangerous. When the generosity suddenly stops, the brain does not simply return to its original baseline. It drops below it, The absence of an expected reward triggers the same neural pathways as punishment. The person does not just feel neutral. They feel deprived. They feel wronged. They feel angry. Psychologists call this entitlement inflation, and it is one of the most destructive forces in human relationships. A person experiencing entitlement inflation genuinely believes that they have been harmed when the kindness they have been receiving is withdrawn, even if that kindness was never owed to them in the first place. They are not pretending to be upset. They are not performing anger for strategic purposes. They actually feel victimized because their brain has rewritten the story so thoroughly that the generosity they received has been reclassified from gift to baseline to right. Let me tell you about a man named Mike. Mike is in his mid-50s, a solid, dependable guy who works as a project manager at an engineering firm in Denver. Mike has a younger brother named Kevin. Kevin has always been the wild card in the family. Charming, funny, full of big ideas, but terrible with money and allergic to steady employment. About 5 years ago, Kevin's latest business venture went belly up, and he found himself staring at eviction. He called Mike in a panic, voice shaking, barely holding it together. Mike loved his brother. He did not hesitate. He went to the bank, took out a loan against his own credit line, and wired Kevin $40,000. Kevin wept on the phone. He said, "Mike, I swear on my life, I will pay you back every cent. You are the best brother anyone could ever have. I will never forget this." Mike told him not to worry about it, to focus on getting back on his feet. And then Mike kept giving. Every Christmas, he bought expensive gifts for Kevin's kids. Every time Kevin's family had a crisis, a medical bill, a car repair, a school expense, Mike quietly stepped in and covered it. He never asked about the $40,000. He never brought it up. He figured family was family, and you do not keep a ledger with the people you love. 3 years went by. Then Mike's company went through a rough patch. His hours got cut. His paycheck shrank. For the first time in years, money was tight. Christmas was coming, and Mike realized he could not afford the usual round of generous gifts for Kevin's kids. It was not that he did not want to. He simply did not have it. So he called Kevin, explained the situation honestly, and said he would have to scale back this year, maybe just send cards and smaller presents. He did not mention the $40,000. He did not ask for any of it back. He just asked for a little understanding during a tough stretch. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted about 3 seconds. Then Kevin said, "Are you serious right now? The kids have been looking forward to Christmas with Uncle Mike all year. You can't even put together a few $100 for your own nieces and nephews? Honestly, Mike, I'm really disappointed in you." And he hung up. Mike sat there holding the phone, staring at the wall, feeling something crack open in his chest that had nothing to do with his finances. $40,000 he had given. Years of generosity, years of showing up, years of never asking for a single thing in return. And the one time he could not deliver, the one time he needed grace instead of giving it, his brother treated him like he had committed a crime. That is what entitlement inflation looks like in real life. It is not theoretical. It is not abstract. It is your brother hanging up on you because you could not afford to be his ATM for one Christmas. It is the friend who stops calling you after you say no to one favor. It is the coworker who badmouths you to the whole office because you did not cover their shift for the 15th time in a row. Friedrich Nietzsche had a term for people like Kevin. He called them practitioners of slave morality, individuals who construct an entire moral framework in which the strong are obligated to give and the weak are entitled to receive, and any deviation from that arrangement is treated as an act of oppression. Kevin did not see Mike's generosity as generosity. He saw it as obligation, and when the obligation was not met, he did not feel disappointed. He felt justified in his anger because in his mind, Mike was not a brother who had given everything. He was a brother who had finally failed to give enough. This is the psychology of the parasite, and it is far more common than any of us want to admit. It shows up in families, in friendships, in workplaces, in romantic relationships. The pattern is always the same. You give freely, the other person adapts, the giving becomes expected, and the moment you pull back, even slightly, even for completely valid reasons, you are suddenly the villain. And the truly insidious part is the gaslighting. These people do not just get angry. They rewrite the entire history of the relationship to cast themselves as the victim and you as the aggressor. They will say things like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" When in reality, the ledger is so lopsided in your favor that it would take them 3 lifetimes to balance it. They will tell mutual friends that you are selfish, that you changed, that you are not the person you used to be. They will weaponize your own generosity against you by framing its withdrawal as evidence of your moral decline. If you let them, they will drain every ounce of energy, joy, and self-worth out of your body like an emotional vampire. And the worst part is you cannot fix them with more generosity. That is the trap that good-hearted people fall into again and again. They think, if I just give a little more, if I just try a little harder, maybe they will finally appreciate me. But it does not work that way. Giving more to an entitled person does not create gratitude. It raises the baseline, feeds the beast. It makes the next withdrawal even more painful and the next explosion of anger even more vicious. The only correct response when you identify a third-type person in your life is to close the valve immediately. Not slowly, not gradually, not with a long conversation about boundaries and feelings. You close it, you stop giving, you step back, and you watch them reveal themselves completely, because when the supply of generosity is cut off, a third-type person will show you exactly who they are with breathtaking speed. They will rage. They will guilt-trip. They will recruit allies. They will try every manipulation tactic in the book to get the faucet turned back on. And every single one of those tactics is confirmation that you made the right call. Let them go. Let them rage. Your peace of mind is not a negotiable asset. So here is the framework, stripped down to its essence. When you meet someone new, or when you want to understand someone who is already in your life, do not play it safe. Do not hedge. Do not calculate. Just give. Pick up the check at dinner. Offer to help them move. Bring them soup when they are sick. Do something genuinely kind, something that costs you a little bit of time or money or effort, and do it without any expectation of return. And then step back and watch. Watch quietly. Watch patiently. The person who takes your kindness, says thanks, and disappears is a casual acquaintance. Enjoy them for what they are and expect nothing more. The person who takes your kindness, carries it with them, and finds some way, any way, no matter how small, to return it with genuine care is a treasure. Build your life around them. Invest in them. Protect them. They are the ones who will still be standing next to you when the world goes sideways. And the person who takes your kindness gets used to it and then punishes you for stopping is a parasite. Cut the cord. Walk away. Do not look back. Do not let them rewrite the story. Do not let them convince you that setting a boundary makes you a bad person. You are not a bad person. You are a person who finally learned the difference between generosity and self-destruction. Being afraid of getting hurt is natural. Everyone who has ever cared about another human being has been burned at some point. But if you let that fear keep you from giving, you will never find the people who are worth it. The price of finding your real people is the willingness to be disappointed by the ones who are not. Think of it as an investment. You are spending a little bit of emotional capital up front to gain a lifetime of clarity about who deserves a place in your world and who does not. The return on that investment is a life surrounded by people who genuinely love you, who show up without being asked, who carry the weight of your generosity with gratitude instead of entitlement. That is not just a good social strategy. That is the foundation of a good life. Take a hard look at the people around you tonight. Think about who has been giving and who has been taking. Think about whether you have been the kind of person who honors generosity or the kind who expects it. And if someone comes to mind who has been quietly, steadily, generously showing up for you without ever asking for anything in return, do something about it. Send them a message. Pick up the phone. Write them a note like Megan wrote Dorothy. Tell them that their kindness did not go unnoticed, that it landed somewhere deep, that it mattered. Because in a world full of people who take and forget, being the one who remembers and returns is the most quietly radical thing you can do. It does not cost much. A batch of cookies, a handwritten note, a phone call that says, "I was thinking about you and I just wanted you to know that I appreciate you." That is all it takes to be the kind of person that everyone is searching for but almost nobody finds. Be that person. And then watch your life change in ways you never expected. Because generosity given freely and received with grace is the closest thing to magic that human beings will ever know.